All right, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the world of software testing.
Okay.
And we got a really great source this time.
Yeah.
It's a real test plan document from Guru 99 Bank.
Awesome.
So have you ever wondered, what goes on behind the scenes to make sure that the software that you use every day, especially something like, a banking website that handles your money, like actually works?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you don't think about until it doesn't work, right?
Right, exactly. And that's where a test plan comes in.
Yeah.
So it's basically like the playbook, the roadmap, the master plan for making sure that all this software does exactly what it's supposed to.
It's like the recipe to make sure that quality is baked in from the beginning.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah.
So like in this case, the cake is a whole banking system.
Right, exactly.
And the test plan that we're looking at for Guru 99 Bank is super detailed. We're talking about like transferring funds, setting up new customers, even deleting accounts. Like it's a lot to cover.
Absolutely. And the first thing any good test plan tackles is like, what is the scope?
Okay.
What are we testing and what are we not testing?
Right, because you can't test everything, right?
That's right. There's always limited resources. You have to prioritize what you're going to be focusing on.
And I see that right here, they have a whole section called out of scope.
Right.
And they list things like the user interface, database logic, even security and performance testing. Like, why would those be left out? Those seem pretty important.
Well, it's not that they're not important. It's just that maybe they're going to be addressed in a separate testing phase.
Okay.
Or maybe for this version of the software, the focus is really on,
Just like
getting that core functionality.
the core voxel.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So like maybe they're assuming that the user interface is largely unchanged and that security has already been like thoroughly tested in a previous version.
Right, exactly.
Fair.
It's all about focusing your resources where they're going to have the most impact.
This is already making me think about like how much planning goes into this before like a single line of code is even tested.
Right.
So they figured out what they're testing.
Yeah.
What about the goals? Like I see a section here called quality objectives. Sounds very official.
It is. Well, this is where they define what success looks like.
Okay.
For Guru 99 Bank, it's all about making sure those core banking functions work flawlessly. Can a customer easily transfer money between accounts?
Right.
Does their balance update correctly? Are withdrawals processed accurately and securely? Like, these are the questions that are driving this whole testing process.
And it's not just about testing in like some perfect isolated environment, right? They got to make sure it works in the real world.
Of course.
With real users, with real like
Exactly.
internet connections and all that.
They have to account for, different internet speeds, different browsers, people doing unexpected things,
Totally.
You want to simulate that real world as much as possible.
Wow, testing sounds way more complex than I initially thought.
Yeah.
It's like a whole science. Okay, so next up, roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
So it seems like there are a lot of people involved in making this happen.
Yeah, you've got your test manager, who's kind of like the conductor of the orchestra, making sure everyone is in sync.
Okay.
And then you've got your testers themselves, who are the musicians, following the score and identifying any of those like off-key notes, which would be bugs in this case.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So everyone has their specific part to play. What about these developers and tests?
Yeah.
Are they composing the music?
Well, they're more like they're helping the composers write music that's easy to play
Okay.
and easy to test. So they're making sure that the code is structured in a way that allows for thorough testing. And they often actually write automated tests that can run very quickly and repeatedly.
Oh, so they're kind of like the quality control experts from the get-go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so now that we know who's doing what,
Yeah.
the next question is, how are they actually going to test this banking website?
Right.
And that's where the test methodology comes in. So we've got our players, we've got our goals.
Uh-huh.
Now it's time to choose the instrument.
You could say that, yeah, there are a bunch of different methodologies out there, like waterfall, agile, iterative, each with their own kind of approach and philosophy. For Guru 99 Bank, they've chosen a blend of 3 main approaches:
Okay.
integration testing,
Okay.
system testing, and API testing.
Okay, hold on. We got to break those down and make sure our listeners are following along.
Okay, sure. So integration testing is kind of like, testing individual instruments to make sure they work on their own.
Okay.
System testing is bringing that whole orchestra together
Gotcha.
to see if they can play a symphony
Okay.
in harmony.
Gotcha.
And API testing is checking that the sheet music is clear and consistent, so everyone's playing the right notes at the right time.
Oh, that's Fantastic explanation.
Yeah.
So they're testing individual components, the whole system working together,
Right.
and then how those components talk to each other.
Exactly.
Okay, wow, it's way more layered than I initially imagined.
Yeah.
What happens when they inevitably find those off-key notes, those bugs?
That's where bug triage comes in.
Bug triage, okay.
Yeah, it's like a medical team coming in and assessing like the severity of each bug, you know,
Okay.
prioritizing the most critical ones and figuring out like what's the treatment plan going to be? How are we going to fix this code?
So they're not just like randomly fixing bugs as they pop up.
Right.
There's like a system for deciding which ones to prioritize.
You want to address the showstoppers first, the things that are going to like, crash the whole system.
Right.
Or compromise security, and then you can work your way down.
So it's starting to feel like an episode of ER, but for software.
Exactly.
Okay, so they're testing, they're finding bugs, fixing bugs. When do they know that they're actually done?
Right.
Like, what defines a successful test?
That's a great question, and this test plan has an answer for that in the test completeness section.
Oh, okay. Let me guess, they're not done until every single bug is squashed.
Well, ideally, yes, but in the real world, it's often about striking a balance between perfection and practicality.
Okay, so what's the criteria for Guru 99 Bank?
Well, they're aiming for 100% test coverage.
100%. Okay.
Which means every single feature, every function that's outlined in that scope has to be tested.
Wow.
Both manually and with those automated tests.
Wow. That is comprehensive. But is that really achievable? Like, what if there's thousands of possible scenarios to test?
It is definitely a challenge, and it often involves prioritizing the most critical areas, the most high-risk areas.
Okay.
And they also need to make sure that all those manual and automated tests have been executed, and any bugs that couldn't be fixed right away are documented and scheduled for a future release.
Gotcha. So it's not necessarily about, like, finding and fixing every single bug, but about ensuring that, like, the most important ones are addressed and there's a plan for the rest.
Exactly. It's about thoroughness, prioritization, and transparency.
Okay.
About what's been tested and what still needs to be done.
This has given me a whole new appreciation for, like, how much work goes into making sure the websites and apps that we use every day are actually reliable.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the scope, the goals, the roles, the methodology, and even how they define success.
Right.
What else is packed into this test plan document?
Well, a good test plan also outlines all the documentation that needs to be produced.
Okay.
Both before, during, and after testing. These are called the test deliverables.
Oh, okay, so we're talking about like reports,
Right.
test results, all that good stuff.
Exactly. So before the testing even begins, you've got the test plan itself,
Of course.
but then you've also got detailed test cases,
Okay.
which outline step-by-step instructions for each test and test design specifications, which kind of explain how those tests are going to be structured and organized.
Makes sense. You got to have a clear plan of attack before you even start testing.
Right.
What about the deliverables produced during and after the testing?
Oh, there's a whole treasure trove of information generated there. You've got test data, which is all the information used to run the tests, a traceability matrix, which kind of connects the requirements to the specific tests that verify those requirements.
Hold on, a traceability matrix. What in the world is that?
Think of it as like a detective's evidence board, you know?
Okay.
It shows the connections between what the software is supposed to do
Okay.
and the specific tests that actually prove that it does it.
Gotcha.
Helps make sure everything is covered, nothing falls through the cracks.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how meticulous this whole process is.
Yeah.
It's not just about clicking around and hoping for the best.
Not at all. You've also got error logs, which document any like unexpected issues encountered during testing.
Okay.
Execution logs that record when each test was run and by whom.
Uh-huh.
Test results reports that summarize those findings.
Okay.
And of course, defect reports that describe any bugs that were discovered.
Wow, it's like a paper trail of like the entire testing journey.
Exactly. And then you're not even done yet. There's also installation and test procedure guidelines, which explain how to set up the testing environment, how to run the tests, and finally release notes, which summarize the key changes and improvements that are included in that new software version.
Okay, my head is spinning with all these documents.
Yeah.
But it's clear they all serve a purpose.
Right.
Ensuring transparency, accountability, and just like a thorough record in the entire process.
Exactly.
Okay, so what else is in store for us in this test plan? Deep dive, this is fascinating.
Well, a good test plan also needs to consider the practical side of things.
Okay.
Like what resources and tools are needed to make all this testing magic happen.
Right.
And that brings us to the next section, resource and environment needs.
Okay, so now it's not just about strategy and documentation.
Right.
It's about the actual tools and equipment they need to get the job done.
Exactly. You'll need specialized software tools for tracking those requirements, managing bugs, automating tests.
Yeah.
And, of course, you need to set up a testing environment that very closely mirrors the real world with the right operating systems, web servers, databases, network configurations.
So like their own little tech world dedicated to testing.
Precisely. You need to be able to control all those variables to make sure that the results are accurate and reliable.
I'm picturing like a high-tech lab with like computers and servers and blinking lights and frantic engineers.
Well, it might not be quite as dramatic as that,
Okay.
but it's definitely a carefully controlled environment.
Okay, tell me more about this tech wonderland. So what kind of hardware and software are we talking about?
So for Guyur 99 Bank, they're going to need computers running Windows 8 or above,
Okay.
equipped with Microsoft Office 2013 or later, and using MS Exchange for email.
Okay.
This ensures that they're testing on a platform that's representative of what their target users are going to be using.
Makes sense. You want to test on the same systems your customers are using.
Right.
What about the behind-the-scenes stuff like the web server and database?
Yeah, well, they'll be using MySQL for the database
Okay.
and Apache for the web server, which are, kind of industry standard tools for web applications.
Gotcha.
This makes sure that you're testing in a realistic environment that mirrors the actual production system.
So they're not just testing the website like in isolation.
Right.
They're testing how it interacts with the database.
The whole ecosystem.
And the server.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they're going to be using a specialized test tool that can automatically generate predefined forms and automate the execution of those tests.
Oh, wow. Automation. That sounds like it could save a lot of time and effort.
It definitely helps to streamline that whole process, especially when you have to run the same tests repeatedly with different data or configurations.
So they're not manually like entering data and clicking through every single scenario over and over again.
Not for everything. No automation is key for those repetitive tasks,
Okay.
which frees up the testers to do more like complex and exploratory testing.
Okay, this is reminding me of how much technology is behind the technology.
Right.
Okay, so they've got their computers, their software, their automation tools. What about the network? So you can't test a website without a decent internet connection, right?
Of course not. The test plan specifies that they need both a local area network, LAN,
Okay.
and a stable internet connection with speeds of at least 5 millips.
Okay, so they're not just testing it on like some super fast internet connection that most users don't have.
Exactly. They need to be considering the average user's experience.
Right.
Which might include, slower connections or intermittent connectivity.
So it's all about realism.
It is.
Okay, before we move on, let's just quickly recap what we've learned so far about the resources and environment needed for testing Guru 99 Bank.
Sure. So they need a dedicated testing lab with at least 4 computers each running Windows 7 with 2 gigahertz of RAM and a 3.4 gigahertz CPU.
Okay.
They'll be using specific software tools for managing requirements, tracking bugs, and automating tests. And they'll need a robust network setup with both LAN and internet connections to make sure there's smooth data flow.
It sounds like setting up this testing environment is like a project in itself.
It is.
But it's clear that every detail from the operating system to the network speed plays a crucial role in ensuring that those tests are accurate and reliable.
You're absolutely right. It's all about creating a very controlled environment that allows for that rigorous testing and minimizing the risk of any unexpected variables influencing the results.
This is making me really curious about the final piece of this test plan puzzle.
Okay.
The timeline and budget. So how long is all this testing going to take?
Yeah.
And how much is it going to cost?
Right. So let's dive into that final section of this test plan project task and estimation.
Okay.
This is where they lay out the timeline, the resources needed, the estimated effort for each stage of this testing process.
All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
All right, so the test plan breaks down the project into 4 main phases.
Okay.
Creating those test specifications,
Okay.
executing the tests, generating those test reports,
Okay.
and delivering the final results.
Sounds pretty logical. So how much time and effort are they allocating to each phase?
So creating the test specifications is estimated to take 170 man-hours.
Wow.
Which involves, very meticulously documenting each test case,
Okay.
defining those expected outcomes.
Wow. That's a lot of upfront planning. but I guess it's worth it to make sure the tests are well-defined and comprehensive.
Right.
What about the actual test execution?
That's estimated to take 80 man-hours,
Okay.
which is, running all those tests, both manual and automated.
So less time actually running the tests than planning them.
Exactly. Yeah, the thoroughness of that planning phase pays off here because it allows for a much more efficient and focused execution phase.
That makes sense. What about reporting? Like, how long does it take to analyze the results and compile everything into like a digestible report?
Well, they've allocated 10 man-hours for generating those test reports,
Okay.
which involves analyzing that data, identifying any trends, and summarizing the key findings.
So relatively short amount of time compared to the planning and execution.
Right. The goal is to present that information very clearly and concisely,
Okay.
highlighting the most important insights for that development team.
And finally, we have the delivery phase.
Yes.
Where they present, the results and recommendations to the stakeholders.
Exactly.
All right.
They've estimated 20 man-hours for that test delivery phase,
Okay.
which involves finalizing the documentation, communicating the key findings, and answering any questions from those stakeholders.
So adding all that up, we have a grand total of 280 man-hours for this entire testing process. That's quite an investment of time and resources. But I guess when you're dealing with something as critical as a banking website, you can't afford to cut corners.
Absolutely.
Wow.
The cost of finding and fixing a major bug after the software has been released is far greater than the investment in thorough testing up front.
Right. It's like the old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Okay, so we've got a solid understanding of the timeline, the estimated effort for each stage of the testing process. But I can't help but wonder what factors might influence these estimations. Like, what if they encounter unexpected challenges or the scope of the project changes?
That's a great question. And it really highlights, that dynamic nature of software development.
Right.
These estimations are just that, estimations. They're based on the best available information at the time, but things change and the team needs to be adaptable.
So it's not just about like sticking rigidly to the plan.
Right.
It's about being flexible and adjusting course as needed.
Precisely. A good test plan provides a roadmap.
Yeah.
But you also need to be able to, navigate detours
Right.
and adapt to those changing conditions as they arise.
This is making me think about the importance of communication and collaboration throughout this whole process.
Absolutely. Everyone needs to be on the same page.
Right.
Sharing information, making adjustments as needed.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our test plan, deep dive. We've explored the scope, the goals, the roles, the methodology, the deliverables, the resources, and even the estimated timeline.
We have.
What's in store for us in part 2?
Well, in part 2, we're going to delve deeper into the specifics of Testing Guru 99 Bank's features.
Okay.
Explore how they approach testing things like fund transfers, account creation security.
Sounds like it's going to get even more interesting.
It is.
Stay tuned, and we'll be right back after a short break.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We're in the middle of dissecting this test plan for Guru 99 Bank, and it's already more fascinating than I ever imagined.
It's a good reminder that we often take software for granted,
Totally.
We just expect it to work, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to ensure that reliability.
Absolutely. And speaking of ensuring things work, we've talked about like the overall plan,
Right.
but now I'm really curious to see how they actually test specific features.
Yeah.
So let's dig into some of those core banking functions we mentioned earlier.
Okay, let's start with one of the most critical fund transfers.
Yeah.
This is where the rubber meets the road, so to speak.
Right, because if you can't move money around safely and accurately, the whole system falls apart.
Right.
What kind of tests would they run for something like that?
Well, they would need to test a variety of different scenarios.
Yeah.
From like simple transfers between a customer's own accounts to more complex transfers to external accounts.
So like different destinations, different types of accounts.
They got to cover all the bases.
You got to cover all the bases.
Exactly. They'll want to test both successful transfers and unsuccessful ones.
Oh, okay.
Like what happens if there are insufficient funds,
Right.
or the account information is entered incorrectly.
So they're not just testing for things working right. They're testing for like how the system handles things going wrong.
Exactly. It's about making sure the system is robust
Oh, that's smart.
and can handle, unexpected situations gracefully.
Yeah.
They'll also want to test different transfer limits, both daily and per transaction.
Right. To make sure those security measures are working as intended.
Right.
What about testing account creation?
Okay.
What kind of things would they focus on there?
Well, they would need to make sure that that whole process is user-friendly and intuitive,
Okay.
while also making sure all the required information is captured accurately.
Okay.
They'll want to test different types of accounts, like checking savings money market,
Uh-huh.
and ensure that the appropriate fees and interest rates are applied.
So making sure that the back-end systems are, like, properly linked to the front-end interface?
Exactly. And of course, they need to make sure that that account creation process is secure,
Right.
preventing unauthorized access and protecting all that sensitive customer information.
That makes me think about security testing in general.
Right.
It's not just about, like, one specific feature. It's like a thread that runs through every aspect of the website, right?
You're absolutely right. Security testing is paramount for any online banking system. They'll need to test for vulnerabilities like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, and brute force attacks.
Okay, hold on. You're losing me with the technical jargon.
Oh, sorry.
Can you break those down, like, in a way that makes sense for someone who's not a cybersecurity expert?
Sure. So think of SQL injection as a way for hackers to try and trick the website into revealing sensitive data.
Okay.
Cross-site scripting is about injecting malicious code into the website that can then be used to steal information from other users.
Gotcha.
And brute force attacks are kind of like trying to guess a password by repeatedly trying different combinations.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So they're not just testing if the website works.
Right.
They're testing if it can withstand attacks from, like, bad actors.
Exactly. They need to make sure that system is fortified against all sorts of malicious attempts to compromise it.
It's like they're building a digital fortress.
Right.
This is making me realize how much more goes on behind the scenes than I ever considered.
Ah.
What other interesting tests would they run on Guru 99 Bank?
Well, they would definitely need to test the website's performance under different load conditions.
Load conditions. What does that mean?
So think of it as simulating like a surge in traffic.
Okay.
Like what might happen if the website suddenly gets featured on a popular news site or during peak banking hours?
Uh-huh.
They would need to make sure the website can handle that increased traffic without slowing down or crashing.
So they're not just testing if it works for, like, one person.
Right.
They're testing if it can handle, like, thousands of people accessing it simultaneously.
Exactly. It's about ensuring scalability and reliability, even under pressure.
I'm starting to understand why this test plan is so detailed.
Yeah.
They have to consider so many different factors and potential scenarios.
And we've only scratched the surface.
Really?
They would also need to test the website's usability,
Okay.
making sure it's intuitive and easy to navigate.
Right, because what good is a secure and functional website if nobody can figure out how to use it?
Exactly. They'll want to test things like the website's layout, the clarity of instructions, and the overall user experience. They might even conduct user testing, where real people try out the website and provide feedback.
That's smart. Get feedback from actual users to see if it meets their needs.
Exactly.
What about testing on different devices?
Oh, yeah.
People are accessing websites on their phones, their tablets, their laptops. Do they have to test for all of those?
Absolutely. They would need to test the website's responsiveness across different screen sizes and devices, making sure it looks good and functions properly on everything from a small smartphone to a large desktop monitor.
This is making me think about how much testing has probably changed over the years as technology has evolved.
You're absolutely right. With the proliferation of mobile devices and just the increasing complexity of web applications,
Yeah.
testing has become even more critical and multifaceted.
It's like a constantly evolving field.
It is.
Okay, so we've talked about testing fund transfers, account creation, security performance, usability, and responsiveness across different devices. Is there anything else they need to test? It's starting to run out of steam here.
Well, they would also need to test the website's compatibility with different browsers and operating systems.
Right, because not everyone uses the same browser or the same version of Windows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need to make sure the website looks and functions properly on all the major browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and Edge,
Right.
as well as on different versions of Windows and Mac OS.
It's amazing how many variables they have to consider.
It is.
It's like a giant puzzle where every piece has to fit perfectly.
It's a testament to the complexity of modern software development, and it's why a comprehensive test plan is so crucial.
Well, after diving deep into the specifics of testing Guru 99 Bank, I have newfound appreciation for the meticulous work that goes into ensuring software quality.
I think we all do.
It's not just about clicking around and hoping for the best. It's a systematic and strategic process that involves a wide range of tests and considerations.
It's a process that's ultimately driven by a commitment to providing users with a reliable, secure, and positive experience.
And that's something we can all appreciate, whether we're software developers or just everyday users who rely on technology to manage our lives.
Absolutely. The next time you seamlessly transfer money online or create an account without a hitch,
Right.
take a moment to appreciate the countless hours of testing
Yeah.
and the dedication of the teams who made it all possible.
Well said. I'm feeling pretty exhausted after all this testing talk, but I'm also feeling incredibly informed.
Good.
I'm ready to tackle the final part of our test plan deep dive, where we'll explore the bigger picture and what it all means for you, our listener. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of software testing. So we've walked through a real test plan for Guru 99 Bank, from defining the scope to outlining specific tests, even peeked into the resource requirements. It's been quite a journey.
It really highlights the hidden complexity behind all the software that we use every single day.
Right. We rarely stop and think about the meticulous planning and the effort that goes into making sure that things work seamlessly.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. It pulls back the curtain and reveals the magic behind the scenes. But I'm guessing our listener might be wondering, okay, this is all very interesting, but what's the takeaway for me?
Yeah.
Why should I care about, test plans and software testing?
Well, it boils down to trust, right?
Okay.
When you use an app, a website, especially one that's handling your finances, you're putting a lot of trust in that system.
Right.
You're trusting that it's secure, reliable, and that it will do what it promises to do.
It's like that feeling of confidence you get when you know that something has been thoroughly vetted and proven to work.
Exactly. And that's what a well-executed test plan provides.
Okay.
A framework for building that trust.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding bugs. It's about demonstrating due diligence, ensuring quality, and ultimately protecting the user.
This whole deep dive has been really eye-opening for me. I'm starting to see software testing in a whole new light. It's not just a technical task.
Right.
It's a crucial part of building a relationship of trust between the creators of the software and the people who use it.
That's a great way to put it. And that relationship is more important than ever in our increasingly digital world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for you, our listener, the next time you encounter a website that's a joy to use an app that just works flawlessly, remember that behind that seamless experience is a team of dedicated individuals and a very meticulously crafted test plan.
And maybe this deep dive has sparked some curiosity in you. Maybe you're thinking about exploring the world of software testing yourself.
That's a fantastic idea. It's a field that's constantly evolving with new challenges and opportunities all the time.
And you don't have to be like a coding whiz to get started.
Right.
There are tons of resources available online and in libraries to help you learn the basics.
You could even start by creating a simple test plan for a personal project,
Right.
like a website or a small app.
Exactly.
Just a great way to kind of put what you've learned into practice and get a deeper understanding of the process.
And who knows, maybe you'll discover a passion for this field and join the ranks of those who work tirelessly behind the scenes to make sure that the software we all rely on is reliable, secure, and user-friendly.
That's right. Well, we hope this deep dive has been insightful and inspiring. Thanks for joining us and happy testing.